Very cool. So we're doing this buyer representation agreement training today because the MLS has basically come out with new rules and regulations. And in the past, I think there was always the threat. Somebody, I think it was Maggie yesterday, mentioned on the call that, like, hey, a buyer could have always walked into an open house before and gotten taken by that listing agent or snatched away in maybe an unethical way or whatnot. That was always a threat. And so now the MLS has made it easier for listing agents to share their branded content, at least for the time being. It's a very short window in time, I'm sure, but it is an issue right now with virtual content being able to be shared that's branded. So now when your clients are searching for property virtually, they're going to be able to see that listing agent's information a lot. It's going to be a lot more accessible than it was in the past. So we thought, what's better than doing a class on buyer representation agreements, which is why we have Daniel Willey with us today. And even I see Christy on the call too. Maybe she can chime in as well, one of his teammates.
She can just come over next door.
Is she next door right now? That's awesome.
Well, she's my neighbor, so.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. So you guys can at least elaborate with us. And again, we're going to be fielding questions for you guys specifically. I know you're going to probably have a lot of questions specific to at least the time right now where we're very virtual and maybe how we go about that. I have some of my own interview type questions. So Daniel, why don't you kind of get into it with us? What made you seem like you're an agent who always uses a buyer broker agreement. What makes you handle your business that way? Or, how do you go about it?
Okay. Well, I'm going to be using a lot more now because of the changing market conditions. I always like to say that in any transaction, it's a relationship. And I will refer that many times throughout this little presentation about the buyer broker agreement. It's a relationship. We work in the sales industry in real estate, but we're really in the relationships industry. And if we view it that way, all contracts, they are easier to digest and they're easier to explain from this perspective that you're in a relationship with that client. And if we eat, sleep, and breathe it, you won't have a problem getting them to sign it. The same way that when we get listing agreements signed, there's no problem to it. Or if you haven't done it yet, you'll get a lot more comfortable about explaining it when you explain it from the relationships aspect. Not so much that they're bound to pay you or anything like that, but just simply an agreement saying, I'm working for you and I'm going to be investing time and energy and doing a lot of things for you. And I'm going to show you what my value is. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation, but I need an agreement back from you. And that's what's really about. It's just solidifying our relationship. So again, that's just the premise. I'm going to bring up relationships a couple times. So when I talk about relationships because I'm going through it myself. So when I recently became single, I just found all the similarities between the dating world and real estate. I've always thought about it before, but now it's kind of like clicked for me. I was like, oh, dating is like real estate all over again. And so we have to, and if you haven't dated for a while, you're going to be in this whole thing again, because we're going to be signing contracts, we're meeting people, we're getting their trust, and we're earning their business. So I love to do open house. Christopher and Christy and Carlos will all tell you I am all about open house all day long because it's free. And the reason I'm bringing up open house is because that's how we're meeting buyer pools for the most part. It's changing now with the markets, but the verbiage and the philosophy of why we do open house is the same. We're there to meet people and we're there to ask them questions, direct questions that are going to promote and provoke thoughts and feelings about what it is to buy a home and what that journey might look like, and to educate them. I say we have about 30 seconds from when we meet them to earn their trust and to get them to provide information, more information, or ask open-ended questions so we get to learn more about them. From there, we have to then educate them in that short amount of time so that they feel like we're someone that they want to work with. So I just have a little quick story about just like the general open houses. So when you're doing an open house or you're just meeting a client through virtual FaceTime or whatever that might be, we're going to ask them, are you working with a realtor? We have to make sure that we're asking those questions because we don't want to step on anyone's toes or start educating a buyer, start reeling them in for the appointment when they might already be in a buyer broker agreement with someone else. Let's just figure that out right away. So then we can determine whether to back off because they're already under a contract with someone else, or to slowly inch forward and to pursue them and to get them to sign our own buyer broker agreement. So it's very important to ask, are you working with an agent? I think now more than ever. If they are working with an agent, then I'll say, okay, when's the last time you talked to them? It may have been a year ago. It may have been a month ago. And then from there, determine, oh yeah, I'm working with an agent. Oh, I'm going to ask, have you signed anything yet with them? Are you in a contract with them? I want to know that first. And if they say yes, I'm like, okay, did you, what did they sign? Did they just sign like the agency disclosure that, tricks them into thinking that they're in a contract? Or did they actually sign a buyer broker agreement? And I'll ask them that straight question. If they said no, I'm like, okay. And then I'll say this. I would like to explain to you what agency is and what that entails. And what that really entails, and I say it's a relationship in which I'll be working for you exclusively, and I'd like to sit down with you and present to you my buyer plan of action and things that I'm going to do for you to help you get into a home. Because we have to think of today's perception of buyer agents. We're kind of glorified door openers, or if that's the way we feel we are. The buyer sees homes on Zillow, on Redfin, or on MLS. They can get MLS links, and they can do all the work themselves. They know what they're looking for in a home. What's our role? What type of value do we add to a buyer nowadays? Because everything's so digital and so accessible. So we have to think about what is our value proposition and how are we going to show that to a potential buyer that we meet at open house or anywhere. So we want to sit down and say, let me list out my buyer presentation to you. Would you be interested? Would Friday at 6 o'clock or Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning be better for you? I'll only need 20 minutes of your time. And we have to time ourselves to our presentation and get that down. I think that's another call. But what it comes down to is we have to convert them into an office meeting, because we can't explain or get the buyer broker agreement signed without earning their business or earning their trust. And so I always like to explain I would like to earn your business. And here's what I'm going to do first. But in order to do that, I need you to come into the office. It's only going to be 20 minutes of your time. You can like me, you cannot like me, but I just want to please give me the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. That's all I ask. Usually that gets them in, because I'm not asking anything, there's no expectations that they're going to do anything, but I'm just asking them to give me a chance. And if I done or
too, which is
yeah,
nice.
and I want them to know that there's always going to be a way out. I'm not going to hop on them or sink my claws into them yet, because I want them to trust me. It's kind of like leading them and luring them in, but you have to give them something to want to come in for. What's going to be what's the point of coming in? And so sometimes I'll touch on it at my open house, but really I want them to come in the office, because it's just a more formal sit down meeting. It kind of asserts my dominance, because this is my territory and they can't walk away simply. It would kind of be rude. So it's a more formal sit down meeting. And it also kind of sets the tone that I'm a professional. I'm serious about what I do, and I have a process. We have to have processes in our business in order for us to have what I would call a duplicatable, not duplicate, for lack of better words, something that we can duplicate. It can be done over and over and again, and there's a means and an ends to what it is to meet a buyer and to sell a house, to give them keys at the end of the day. Every transaction is a little bit different, but we do have a system, and that's what I try to reiterate with every buyer and seller that we meet. There's systems to everything, and I have a process. I'm gonna just go on a small tangent. So just kind of pulling up stats. 75% of you can convert 75% of your buyers through an office sit-down meeting, rather than just kind of meeting them at an open, just showing them properties right away. Your chances, your odds actually of retaining a client go down significantly to 25% if you just pick up the phone call from an online Zillow lead, or meet them at the open house, get their criteria, say, oh, that's cool, and just instantly start showing them properties.
Are these stats that you are saying came from your own findings, or are these something that you say like from online or from an article somewhere?
This is my own track history. It goes down significantly. And this is the other thing, track your business. track your business. I have files from my first year in real estate, my first clients. I wrote down the open house that I met them at, the day of the week it was, and all their info. I still have those sheets because why? I can look back at my files and say, oh, that transaction closed. How long did it take from when that person first walked into my open house, I first met them, to when I saw a paycheck? And so right now the average is about 90 days. It give or take some, I had one where it was a Saturday, met them on Monday, we opened escrow for a house. Those are rare, but typically I tell my agents, it's about a 3-month turnaround from when you meet them to them getting qualified, them looking for homes, to them finding the right house, to you actually getting a paycheck it's about 90 days. Could be less. Some might have quicker turnovers, but the average is that. But again, it comes down to, I know my business because I'm recording everything. I'm taking little, just putting little notes on the client info sheets. And then I can also tell you what days I'm converting more at open house. I know that weekends are great. I get a lot of names and numbers on weekends, but my strongest days at open house where I actually got clients that eventually closed into transactions were Thursdays. I at open house. That's what ended up closing and producing income for me. So yes, I love doing open house on the weekends, and I'm not saying those are terrible, but I know my business now where I can say that weekdays open houses are actually a lot more profitable for me in my business.
What's funny is I've been preaching weekday open houses for a long time, and it's good to hear that from somebody who who's actually, preaching of having success from that. So thank you for sharing that. That's huge.
Yeah. And I can say that because again, I've tracked my business. I've tracked where my business come from and how long it takes and where and when I'm meeting people. I know that I'm also converting higher in Cal Heights than I would in like Los Altos. Because I know the location of the open house. So these are all little things. I know it's not necessarily buyer broker, but it's about how we track our business so that we're a lot more savvy when it comes to explaining our value to clients, what we know about ourselves and why we're important to work with and why they should sign a contract with us, because we know our business the ins and outs of it. Okay.
That's
so
huge.
That's my little tangent about like the office meetings, because I'm such a huge proponent for meet them at the office, set the tone, because the conversion will be a lot higher.
Earlier, before you keep going, you made a comment for just those people that don't know this on the call. You had said something about, do they just have an agency disclosure signed versus a buyer broker agreement? Do you want to just explain the difference between that and the tactic real quick so people understand the difference there?
Of course, yeah. So it's the buyer agency, or no, the agency disclosure simply states what that role of the agent is. It doesn't bind them into any contract. It just simply states, if I'm representing the buyer, here's my roles and responsibilities and fiduciary duties in the transaction when we move forward or during that process. If I'm a listing agent, here's my processes. If I represent both buyer and seller, here's my roles and responsibilities. That's all that it says. Read it. It just states out what your roles are. It doesn't obligate the buyer.
But agents use that as a way to make people feel like they've been committed completely.
Totally. And
yeah.
And it's, again, just educating the buyer. I always like to say to a buyer and to a seller, I'm going to teach you everything that I know about the process of buying and selling real estate. By the end of us working together, you're going to be a mini realtor. You're going to know a lot about what these contracts mean. Not that you want to be a realtor, but should you have friends and family that have questions, you can properly guide them. And ultimately, and I kind of throw in a little, referral, you can then know that I can help them as well. And I'd be more than happy to sit down and work with them and educate them as well. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I like to use the word misinformation because it's tossed around so much now in the media and with the White House. Like, misinformation is what we want to stray away from, but we also have to use it as a tool to leverage ourselves into a position of education and correct information. So I would say there's a lot of misinformation. I'm going to explain to you what these contracts mean. I say, if you have a question about it, you can read it. The contracts are not complicated in their verbiage. You just have to take it slowly. That's all it is. And I say that to my agents as well. It's not confusing. The listing contract is not confusing. The buyer purchase agreement is not confusing. It's just a lot of words, and we look at the page and it's just a lot of writing and we get overwhelmed by it. But if you just take it bit by bit, read it like a storybook, it tells us the story of what a transaction is going to look like, when things are supposed to happen, when things are supposed to be removed, what happens if we run into a disagreement, and what happens when we close. All those things are outlined in the contract. It simply tells us the story and how things are done, so that when we are in a transaction, there is no question about what happens next. It's all stated in the contract, and we can always refer to it should there be any misinterpretation. So
No, I
again,
like that. It really does tell a story. That's a neat way to word that. I like that.
it does. And that's what I kind of grew up learning. My parents told me to read the contract, and then if I didn't get it, they said, just read it again. If you don't understand it, just read it over again. And so knowing your contract is, I think, the basis, and what I strongly advise for any new agent, especially when we're at home right now. Take your time to really understand your contract, because that's what our job is. We're independent contractors, and we need to know what our business is and what our clients are signing. And that kind of leads us into buyer broker agreement. Know all your forms right now. Take the opportunity to understand what it is that they're signing, so that if there is a question, you can speak to without even looking at the contract and reading it along with them to try to figure it out. You can look them straight in the eye and say, this is what it means. And if they want to verify it, they of course read the contract. But it establishes a relationship when you can stare a person in the eye and explain to them what is sitting before them. It creates a trust. It creates a type of, we're training them to listen to us and to look to us directly for guidance, because we are the professionals in this industry, and that they need us in order to buy and sell real estate. If we're going to read the contract with them, what's the point? What are we really then? We're audibles. We're contract audibles. We just read it out loud with them. We have to know it, and we have to tell them from our own intellectual standpoint what it means, and use stories to explain the different things like contingencies. Integrate a story so they can learn it and understand it, not just what, oh, it's supposed to be removed, inspection contingency removed in 7 or 10 days, a loan contingency. Explain to them how that's significant.
So
again,
it sounds like your whole presentation is very value based, which I love. Why don't you dig a little deeper? What other points of value? Because I'm sure when you're going to get a buyer broker agreement signed, it's a lot easier if you've led up the entire presentation with value points, right? So
yes.
dig in a little deeper. What other things do you go over with them? What makes it easier to get that agreement signed?
Okay, I'm going to answer that. So we should treat every buyer, and I treat every buyer like a seller. When we get buyer leads, we sometimes think, oh, I got their criteria, what they're looking for, this and that, write it down. Okay, I'm going to set up an appointment to show them. But if we get a seller lead, we go batshit crazy. We're just like, oh my God, I have to get my CMA together. I have to get this, I have to get that. I want to set the appointment right away because I don't want to lose this listing. We should be treating buyers the same way. Buyers are like, I want to say 60 to 70% of my business right now. That's all I have right now. I have Christy and Christopher have listings, but right now, buyers. And I value them so much because of these trying times, because it's hard to get more buyers. So I'm realizing how important buyers really are to me. I used to dismiss them. They were the starting blocks of my business. As a new agent, we typically get buyers more. They're easy to work with. They're kind of like sheep that need guidance, especially first-time home buyers. But we have to really, really treat buyers the same way that we treat sellers. And when we meet with a seller, we get a contract. It's an expectation. We are going to get a listing contract signed, or that's what we want from the seller. So why don't we want buyers to sign a contract? Why are we so skittish about getting a buyer to sign the contract when we should value buyers the same way as sellers? Okay. We're afraid of them to say no. Well, it's the same thing with listings. How are we going to handle those objections where we turn that no into a yes? That's what we have to think about and kind of change our own perception. If we value ourselves as really strong buyer agents that have value to provide, the same way that we have value to provide to sellers, then making them sign a commitment to work with us exclusively is just a matter of fact. So getting into that, I just wanted to kind of set the tone in terms of like how we should view them, because in order for them to want to sign the buyer broker agreement, we have to have that value. And that's why I wanted to say we have to put the value, put the work into it as if they were a seller, because it's going to lead to a commission check at the end of the day. We price listings a much more than we price buyers, because we don't get that commitment from buyers all the time, or it's sometimes hard to get a buyer to get into the right home, or having the inventory. There's all these other things. But if they're in a contract, we know that through thick and thin, they're going to work with us. They will eventually buy. We can set the terms for 30-day contracts, a year contract, a 5-year contract. We know that at the end of the day, they will buy because they're meeting us at open houses. They're out there, however we met them through that lead source. They're going to buy real estate. It may not be right away, but that's what bugs us about buyers, is that that's not what we call a guaranteed check through a listing. We know that the listing will sell. Some listings don't sell. So it's the same thing. You know, we don't want to necessarily push that with a buyer, but we should be pushing it with a buyer, because a buyer will buy. It just will take some time. So going into that, we have to set the meeting, get to know their expectations from what they want from us, because same thing with working with seller, we want to know what it is that you want me to do. Do you want me to call you every single day, even though I don't have necessarily a news or an update? Do you want me to call you every Friday? Or what is your expectation of the real estate agent, so that you know what you have to meet? We have to understand those expectations. And same thing from a buyer. They might say, I'm only available on weekends to see properties. Now I know I'm not going to bug them during the week. I might text them if there's a really hot property that came up on Tuesday, but if they say weekends are the only times I want to see property, then yeah, that's the only time we're going to see property. So setting expectations is crucial. Then we have to determine their personality type. How do they work with us? How do I have to work with them in order to get them to like me? The other thing is buyer education, getting them to understand what the contracts mean, what is to go into escrow. This is all part of the buyer sit-down meeting. And then I have to demonstrate my professionalism. And that includes getting them to sign a buyer broker agreement. So with the buyer broker agreement, this is all my buyer presentation. I'm just kind of giving you a gist. But I have to tell them, like, what's the point of signing a contract with me? Why should you do that? And I say, well, I'm going to have a buyer plan of action for you. And I'm going to list these items down. I had to write them down kind of off the top of my head, because when I go into buyer presentation mode, I should have more materials like actually typed up, but right now it's just all in my head. That's how I go through a lot of my meetings. It's a very intimate meeting. I'm sharing my experiences, my knowledge with them verbally, and it's a conversation. But I definitely need to write this stuff down. So my buyer plan of action, this is why I need you to sign a contract, because I'm going to be doing these items for you. And kind of relates to Maggie Knight, and we'll kind of get to that at the end of my buyer plan of action. I'm going to door knock, for you. I'm going to knock. That's what I can do. I'm a real estate agent. I can door knock and find those homes, because they can find homes on Zillow and Redfin, but I'm going to find off-market opportunities for you. I'm going to go a step above. These are things that agents don't normally do. They just wait for the listings to come up on the market and see what, then once it's new, as soon as it does hop on the market, I'm going to share it with you. The buyer can do that themselves now. Heck, they have so much time. They'll probably find it the millisecond before we send it to them. They probably have their own trackers on. So what are we going to do differently to add that extra, that special sauce to make them sign the contract? So I'm going to door knock. I can telemarket. I can get access to their phone numbers. I can call them directly and ask them, are you buying or selling? I can use direct mail. I can work at the title company and find out all these seller addresses that have their criteria, and I can direct mail them with a letter saying, I have a buyer that is interested in your home profile, and I would like to match you two up. I can research, and this is where Maggie Knights comes in, I can research expired or withdrawn or off-market properties from like 4 or 5 years ago, or sometimes a little bit more recently, but that's not on that's not on Zillow or Redfin. We have to kind of think of what what do we have access to through the MLS that Zillow or Redfin cannot provide? So we can research those expires that have that match criteria. Call that owner that for whatever reason had to take it off the market and say, I have a buyer for you, and connect them that way. I know Maggie and I just had recent success with that, or at least that's what I kind of saw through Instagram and Facebook. For sale by owners, I'm going to contact for sale by owners. Those not all the time on the MLS and not all the time on Zillow. Sometimes it's just a front yard sign. I'm going to be driving by neighborhoods, and that kind of comes with door knocking. You're going to see those FSBO signs, and I think a lot more now because sellers know that they can kind of sell their house on their own, or at least they think they can, and avoid all the realtor fees. I can pitch what you're looking for on buyer broker tours. There's, I can say that there's 2 big ones that are that prominent in the area, and there's a lot of agents that come to those. I say we have a lot of agents that come and participate, and I can pitch what you're looking for and try to connect it with another realtor that may have a listing coming up soon. So I can get you in the front door before everyone else, or before photos are even being taken. I want to get you in there first. These are things that I'm doing. I can also pitch it at my office meetings. We have one of the largest offices in Long Beach with over 300 something agents. I can pitch out to that might have something to connect you as well. And I can also contact maybe area specialists in that area, agents that typically have a lot of listings in the area, and I'm going to contact them and ask if they have anything coming up in the neighborhoods that you're interested in. These are all the things that I'm going to do for you that are going to take a lot of time, and I'm ready to do it, and I'm excited to do it, but I need that commitment from you. I really do need you to sign this commitment saying that when I do find you that home, whether it be on the market or not, that you're going to use me as your realtor for representation, and I'm going to help you get the best deal for that property as well. And more importantly, at the end of the day, get you keys so that you can own your own home and live that next chapter of your life. That's what I want to sell. And so that's what my buyer plan of action is these are all the things that I can do. And I'm going to, they're not going to have any other agents telling them this. I haven't heard agents telling buyers this. They'll say, as soon as that market comes on, or as soon as that property comes on the market, I'll get you in there. Well, what's the value of it? You have to kind of think, how am I going to be different during these times? And buyers, they don't have access to anything that we just talked about. The door knocking, they're not going to do that. The telemarketing, the direct mail, searching for expireds and withdrawals, they can't do that. So these are things that we still can do through the MLS that set us apart. And usually, after you tell them all of this, they're blown away. They're like, well, it makes perfect sense then. If you're going to do all of this, then yeah, I'll sign an agreement, no problem. And if they're still hesitant, just say, okay, I'm not going to push it right away because I don't like pushy types of relationships. I want my buyers to love me, or my sellers to love me, and they will. They're going to love us because we're people persons, but I have to still earn it. It just means that I haven't earned their trust yet. So I'm like, okay, let's look on for some properties together. I'll go on the computer with them, shoulder to shoulder. We'll kind of hand pick out some properties, and then I'll say, I'm gonna earn your business. I'm gonna earn your trust. Watch me. Let's go see these properties. When's your next available day? Once we see these properties, I'm gonna be asking you again to sign this contract, but let me show you what I can do first. And then again, they're like, okay, I like this. I'm going to set up the appointments. I'm going to show the properties, but then I'm going to be talking to them about things that they can do. Let's write the offer. I'm going to start talking about maybe objections that they might have at the home. They say it's dark. I say, well, the blinds are down. So yeah, that's why it's dark. Let's open these things up. Oh, I don't like the paint color. Paint's easy. I don't like the floor. Flooring's easy. These are all cosmetic things that we can definitely work with. And if I can help educate them about what it is to really buy a home, not just looking at the look of it. I talked about the location, what type of lifestyle is going to provide for them, focused on that. And through that, they understand like, okay, Daniel's not about a quick sale. He really is intrigued by this home search that I'm embarking on, and he cares. And he really does want to help educate me as well, because sometimes we get in our own way as a buyer. I was a really fussy buyer for myself, and I understand that firsthand, that there's a roller coaster of emotions that we're going through, and there's a lot of things that are running through our head. But if we have someone there to just sound off ideas, to counsel us, to kind of check us and say, this is not a big deal, I then rely on that person. I'm starting to create this reliability with my buyer, that they need someone else to talk to, and or even just run their mouth. Just tell me what you're feeling and thinking. I'm going to earn that trust. And then I bring out the buyer broker agreement again, and I say, I'm going to do all these things for you, and I really care about you, and I want to make sure that you get this home. I need this commitment from you, because I'm ready to commit to you as well. And then it's a matter of fact. And then usually by that time, it's signed. So there's only, I will sign it either at the office. That's usually when I do it, when I do the buyer plan of action. But if they're still hesitant, I'll take them on one property tour. Like, could be 1 or 3 houses max, no more than like an hour and a half, 2 hours of my day. Because again, there's no guarantee yet. They're not in a contract with me. And then I'll ask them to sign a contract. And it always works.
Do you always show property right after a buyer's consultation, or is it kind of depending on the needs of the client?
It depends on if they're ready to go forward and go through the qualification process. I'll kind of go into like from open house. So open house, I get their name and info, and I also want the lender to follow with them right away, because the lender may or may not be able there to meet with the buyer. Here's the thing, I always bring a lender to the consultation if I can, because even though they may have their own lender, or they don't want to talk about financing, I'm going to have the lender there, just in the event that once we, kind of break their shell and get them talking, that they're willing to start filling out a loan application with that lender and get things rolling. More importantly, I bring the lender there to talk about numbers. The lender can bring their computer, get their income, ask them if they have any debts and things like that, and give them a rough estimate for what their purchase power could be. Again, we haven't ran their credit, but it's another added value, that here's a free human calculator to kind of give us a gauge on where you qualify for a home. That way we can get a better idea of what you want to buy and where you want to buy. I make this joke to them. I say, if you don't want to get qualified, I'll stick you, straight to Beverly Hills, and we'll start looking at 1.8 million, because it has everything that you're looking for, right? I kind of make a joke. I'm like, I'll be a kid in a candy store, because that's a great price point. I'd love to sell property like that. Do you want to buy?
That's a fun way to throw it back on them, for sure. I like
exactly. that. I tell them, like, we have to know what our price range is. When I bring up cars a lot too, because people kind of comprehend buying a car, because we buy more cars than we buy houses in our lifetime, typically. So I'll say, it's like going straight to the Mercedes dealership and saying, I want the S550, and we don't even know if we might be able to afford that, but we don't know if we want to make those payments as well, because the price point is also relative to the payments that we want to make for that price point and how much we're putting down. So I say, let's figure out what type of house that we're looking to get, and there's a lot of other moving pieces that we need to figure out first. So I have, depending on what I kind of play, there's 2 different scenarios. One is not tell them about the lender and just kind of crash the lender there at the buyer consultation when they come into the office to meet with me. Or if I feel like time is of the essence, I'll have the lender call them and do an on the phone consultation. And the lender will then kind of tell me what we're working with and if this person's ready to start showing properties. Because I don't want to go out on a whim and show a bunch of properties if I don't know that buyer can even do it or still need some time.
Now, I know the virtual world is pretty new to all of us on this call today, but for you, Daniel, have you noticed any shift in your business since it's become more virtual? Is it harder to get those agreements signed? Have you gotten any agreements signed, or how are you operating right now virtually?
Since the stay at home, I call it the shutdown of the world, I haven't had to implement this yet. The business that I'm working with right now, the buyers that I'm working with, even the sellers, they're all before this pandemic kind of spread. I'm getting a sense that I'm going to have to adjust my business because I was on another Zoom meeting with other realtors, and this might be a lot longer than anticipated or what they're telling us. I have some friends in the medical field that know a little bit more, and this is going to be a lot longer than what the 2 weeks or even till April. It might be months up to a year. So we have to definitely adjust how we're going to stay out there, because a lot of us don't have a year's worth of cost of living in our piggy bank. So, or already kind of noticing now and getting nervous. So yes, how I'm going to get virtually in front of buyers and sellers is through self-marketing, using this opportunity to offer value to our community, be community members, because we can still do that. Just getting to know our neighbors more. And if we maybe don't have a great farm area that we live in, pick a farm area. There's nothing that says that this is someone else's territory. If you want to go straight to Naples and door knock Naples and get to know everyone in Naples and just be a friendly person, a resident, or just someone who wants to meet them, go ahead and do it. This is your opportunity. Bring something of value, of course. It might be a recently sold flyer from another listing in the area to encourage them that the market's still moving. It might just be even just a little bit of hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, I don't know what the black market's running right now for that, but if you can just bring a hand sanitizer with your business card and just say like, hey, hope that you stay safe, and I'm here for you, and I'm really like to just earn your business. Should you know anyone that was interested in buying or selling, hope that you think of me when you use this. It's just there's so many creative ways, ideas, and you can talk with your title. I'm not going to go into all the ideas, but you can talk with your title officer, or I think title officers are the most creative right now, or have all those like game plans set, or lenders as well, in terms of things that you can do to door knocking to get face to face with people. I still think that you're not going to be completely shut down. When it comes to virtual things though, I think that having a type of video content or video method of communication is the most effective, because I need to read your facial expression. I need to read how your eyes are moving around my face, or what if you're making eye contact with me, to feel like we're having a connection. We can talk on the phone for sure, but I'm kind of like, I'm blind. I don't really know.
Body language is crucial. Yeah, I agree.
And everyone's kind of doing it now. It's all, and like you were saying, everyone has had this technology for a while, but now we're being forced to use it, and it's just become a new norm. Very quickly, it became a new norm, where now we're doing video calls and FaceTiming and Zoom with other groups of people. So I would leverage that and take advantage of this time that everyone's doing it, and use that as a way to connect. Make more Facebook Live videos, make more Instagram Live videos. Stay on there for 5 or 10 minutes until you get enough followers that are going to start watching your video. Don't expect that after 30 seconds or a minute that you're going to have an audience. Just play it out. Just hold it up there until people start logging on. That's what happens. Of course, the more followers you have, the quicker that they'll log in, the better you're following. Of course, you'll get more followers quickly. But if you even have like 200 followers on Instagram, or friends on Facebook, over 100 friends on Facebook, then use that opportunity to just kind of create this long video, which you can answer questions on the spot. Talk about new properties that are coming on the market. Talk about buyer education. Talk about contracts. Talk about the changing things in real estate. People want to know. Real estate, it's one of the only subjects that you can talk about anyone from anywhere across the country or the globe, and there's interest in it. People want to talk about real estate, and we happen to be realtors.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Daniel. We've got we've got 20 minutes technically left, but I did want to open it up for questions in case we get on any tangents.
Yeah. Oh,
anybody have any questions for Daniel, or specific situations to the here and now that you want to share? Feel free to use chat, or just go ahead and unmute yourself.
It's so quiet.
Jump all at once. I know we've been talking for a minute. Maybe that's why.
Another news.
Puppy.
I got Puppy. Oh, good.
Oh my gosh,
Daniel.
so
Hi,
cute.
Daniel. I just wanted to say that was a lot of knowledge that you gave to us, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to listen to it a couple of times I know all of us are overwhelmed with that much information, but I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, Pam. Yeah. I mean, we just have to, I know it's tough right now, but like there's so many things that we can still do for buyers. And again, what's going to separate us from the other realtors out there during these times where we can't necessarily do open houses? That's kind of like my bread and butter, the foundation of my business right now, or it was until this kind of stay at home started. So I have to think like, how am I going to still generate leads and get in front of buyers and show buyers properties during these times that we can't go out?
Ernie Gutierrez is asking, who is your lender, or what lenders do you use?
I have I would say a handful of lenders. I believe that I, as a realtor and a person who works in the relationships business, I'm really careful about how I pair lenders with clients. Different lenders have different personality, different work styles, different communication styles that I have to be very careful of when matching them with a client. So I say I have a handful. I don't say I have like a dedicated lender. I love all lenders. You know, they do relatively the same job, but some lenders are different. Some lenders have a different experience that they transcend into how they work with buyers. So I have one that's been doing it. She's a little bit later down the line, but she's been doing it a long time. And if I have a particular kind of like fussy buyer or one that's really skittish, I'll pair them with her because she's going to hold their hand. She's kind of like a grandma for them and help and guides them through her, you know, her own stories. And they will spend a lot of time talking to her on the phone. And she doesn't necessarily just talk about lending or finance. She'll have she's a storyteller in how she does her business. So I will pair some skittish buyers with her. I have other buyers that are a lot more tech savvy. So I'll connect them with a lender that has all the bells and whistles that they can use, like link share uploads and all this other, you know, stuff that they, you know, that millennials or just more tech people find really attractive or convenient. Others like to do it in person. So I have to kind of match them with the right lender. And you know, we're all humans. We all have different personalities. I think realtors, we have to learn how to be chameleons with our personalities to make everyone like us, but we still have our own personalities.
And just so everybody knows, we've got, you know, 3 or 4 amazing lenders at Eximino. We've got a fabulous lender at in Seal Beach. I love our team, Tom and Pam in Lakewood. So feel free to lean on all of them. It's really interesting. We've got so many great lenders and they all have different tools and different programs that they offer. There's really no like even keeled response with any of them. So I'd say, you know, take the time maybe to take them to coffee and get to know them a little bit better and what they've got going on. I think that would be a huge thing for you guys to do, to even just start with our affiliates and go from there. Melissa Mahalik asked a question earlier. Maybe Melissa, you want to unmute yourself or explain a little bit more, but it says, where would I find the buyer and seller agreement, not contract, to go over what we provide? I guess maybe Daniel, do you have anything, like any material that you bring to the table that you show like what your services are? I know you kind of mentioned earlier that it's a lot of it's in your head right now.
Yeah, and a lot of it's through conversation too. With the buyer presentation, again, I should probably take this time to like start typing everything up to create more, and use also like Casey, she has a really great buyer presentation packet that's already kind of pre-made for you that has all the company branding. Definitely use that as a great template to start with, and then kind of make it your own, add to it, make it something that's custom to you. So when you're explaining it to your clients, you really, it's part of you. It's you that you're talking about. It's not something that's you know, company or corporate generated. So again, my buyer presentation, there's 5 main points that I have during the buyer presentation. The first one is setting the expectation of what they want from me, what they need from me, and then determining their personality style, laying out the groundwork for what it's going to look like, what the process might be, buyer education about the different contracts and forms out there that they're going to be signing, and how these contingencies work. A lot of times they think that once they write an offer on a property that they have to give them a check before they get accepted. So just educating the buyer in terms of like how the deposit works, how contingencies work, how they can achieve, or and then back out of the transaction in a sense that they're not stuck in it, because I think they get a little bit skittish sometimes, thinking that if once they write an offer on the house, like they're obligated to buy it, and that's not the case. I explain them the ways out, and then the last is demonstrating the professionalism that I'm going to bring to the table, which goes into my buyer plan of action and what I'm going to do that sets myself apart from any other agent that they would even be tempted to work with, and why they should work with me.
Tracy Wiltsey raised her hand. Tracy, do you want to unmute?
Daniel, I'm just so impressed with the fact that you're saying we need to treat the buyers like sellers. And wow, I've been in this business a long time, and we've talked about buyer broker agreements, we've talked about representation, but I've never heard that. I've never heard treat them as a seller, and that's absolutely true. And we have to get an agreement with the seller. We need to get an agreement with the buyer, and we do that, just like you said, we build value. And I loved the fact that you said if they're not ready to do that in the office, that means I haven't earned their trust yet.
Exactly.
And it's time. It's like a garden, and I'm not a gardener, so I'm using a metaphor I'm not even really sure about. But you plant the seeds, and you water them, and you have a little bit of patience, and you watch them for weeds. You pull out the weeds, and they grow, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway. You know what I mean? But I love the idea that if they're not ready to sign, it's because I haven't earned their trust yet. So maybe I do a small little property tour and talk about that, and also I absolutely love the idea of what are we going to do that sets us apart from them just looking for a property on Zillow. Because they're coming like, what am I paying you for? I found the house myself. Like that's the end all. And just specifically stating these items are so great. May I offer also, you were talking about how to nurture these people during this time. And I mentioned this, if you don't mind, Nick, can I share something?
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I mentioned this in our meeting, I think it was last week. I'm doing coaching, I'm providing coaching, and I'm getting coaching. And some of the ways that we can continue to nurture and ultimately get leads generated are to maintain communication, over communicate, but watching our tone is critical, and not for the sale, not for the close, unless they're out looking at property, right? Unless they're seeing it virtually, and then you're talking about objection handling and that thing. But if they're not ready to go out, they're still in that nurturing process. So a script would be, hi, I'm calling up, I'm Daniel, I'm your realtor, but this is not a real estate call. I'm calling to see how you are.
Yeah.
How's it going at home? How are the kids? Are you going out of your mind? Do you need to take a walk? Do you want some ideas on keeping the kids busy? Because I got some ideas from other people. How's the work environment? I'm healthy. How can I support you?
Yes. Because
these are long-term, again, they're cultivating, they're growing, they're nurturing the people that you know, and down the line, just like you said in the thing about there'll be a mini realtor, they will be your greatest advocate because you're there for them, just checking to see how they're doing and saying, what can I do? How can I support you?
Yeah, that's really great. And exactly, I think we're seeing a little bit more of that, but we can definitely do more about just being a resource for everyone and putting ourselves out there and taking this opportunity, because people are at home, some of them, maybe unemployed. So they have time to talk, and they need someone to talk to.
Anything else, guys? Any other questions for Daniel? Did I miss anybody? I know Betsy gave a great comment earlier. She said she agrees with everything Daniel has said, especially the most important thing was to get people to sit down with you and read them and be responsive while you talk to them with your initial meeting. That's huge. Nikki says, how specific are you on the buyer broker agreement? Do you fill it out ahead of time, or do you fill it out during the meeting? Do you fill in the property area and time period during your meeting? Do you fill the portion regarding the buyer paying commission?
Okay, so I love that section because it gets a little bit, I've explained it many times, and I kind of thought like, kind of like the purchase agreement, there's certain things that I can just gloss over. It's in the contract, but it's not necessarily something I have to read out loud with them or touch base line by line with them. But one of the more important things is as they read it or as they're signing it, it's pretty obvious. I think it's at the bottom of the first page or the top of the second page. It's about the compensation. And it says that the buyer is going to be, it says, buyer responsibility is to pay for the commission. And I have to explain that to them that the seller offers a buyer agent commission. And if that is offered, that is credited to what the commission would be. So I put it at 2.5% because if the seller offers 3%, I'm still going to get 3%. It just means that I'm going to work for a minimum of 2.5%. Now, other people might say I'm going to work for 3% or 4%, but I just don't want to, make any waves. I want to be, what the market is trending. And right now the buyer agent compensation is at least 2.5%, or that's the minimum that I'll work for. So I'll put in the 2.5%. And then again, I tell them that the seller is going to be crediting you this 2.5%. This is always offered. I said, I will let you know if a seller is not going to be paying any compensation to a buyer agent. And then we can discuss that if we should want to proceed. But again, the seller is going to be offering compensation on the MLS. And if it's an off-market property, I'm going to be talking with that seller and telling them that I'm going to bring them a ready, willing, able, breathing buyer that's qualified and has already gone through all the pre-approval process, and I'm trying to connect them to the home. And this is the fee. It's going to be 3% or whatever. I'll start at 3% to broker this transaction between the buyer and seller, or 2.5% if they kind of get me down. But I'll have that already worked out for them, so I will be compensated.
Very cool. I think that pretty much answers it. Do you put in a specific area, or are you just anywhere?
I just leave it open, yeah. Because I say we don't know where your home might be yet. We think, and I say it's a journey. And I use a small story. I said I had a client from Boeing that said, I want a craftsman in Rose Park. We worked together for a few months. It ended up being a year. And then they bought a property in Marina Pacifica. So, because they realized that that's what the lifestyle that they wanted to live, but it took them a while to understand what home really meant for them. So I say buying a home is a journey. We think we know what we want already, but once we get into the motions and we start seeing properties, the things can change. You might, come from, say I want to be by the water, and end up buying in Cal Heights or Bixby Knolls because you like the neighborhood there, and you're still close to the water. You're just a little bit of a drive. So I always say, like, area, I don't want to be too specific or corner ourselves. And I say corner ourselves in a specific area or house because we don't know what that journey might be.
One more question, Daniel, from Alma. She says, what if the compensation is less than 2.5% basically of what the seller is offering? Who pays the difference? Does the buyer pay you?
Well, that's what the contract says. Yeah, the contract says that the buyer is responsible for paying whatever percentage or set amount, but everything's still negotiable. At the end of the day, I haven't even run into that problem really. So I'm kind of just speaking figuratively on how I would react if the compensation were to be 2%, and the buyer broker agreement states 2.5%. I'm going to try first to get that compensation up, whether it means that, we increase the purchase price a little bit from the seller side, so that sometimes the listing agent didn't even think about this creative way, like, well, what if we increase the price? And that way both agents get 2.5% instead of both getting 2%. Sometimes we have to kind of educate the listing agent on these things, on how to compensate ourselves properly or for what we deserve. So I would say everything's negotiable, and the contract really just it gets that relationship secured. So I don't have to worry about another buyer going into an open house or getting a flyer from another agent and them wandering elsewhere, kind of seeing where the grass is greener, or being misled with misinformation about what this agent can offer them, or double-end a transaction. I just want them to get in the contract. When it comes to compensation, if I have to end up taking a 2%, I'm gonna be a little bit disappointed. I'm a little bit disgruntled, but I will work for that. And I really wouldn't expect the buyer to pay for the difference, because I want to be that representative for them. I don't want to necessarily add an additional cost onto them, because I don't think that's something that they deserve. That's my perspective. They have a lot of costs. They have closing costs. They have, you know, lender fees. They have all these other things. I pride myself in saying, as a buyer agent, you don't pay me. I work for free until you get your keys to your home. And there's something that's special that resonates in everyone that I tell them to, because they think that the misinformation is that sometimes the buyer has to pay for their agent's fees. And I say, no, the seller has already agreed to compensate me and already has a set compensation for me. So I'm working for free for you. And it just kind of goes to show, like, I'm doing all this pro bono. I'm going to be working for you. I'm going to be door knocking. I'm going to cold calling. I'm going to be pitching for you, all this for free. So the least you can do is agree to work for me. That's the least. That's all I ask. I'm not asking for any money. I'm not going to ask for you to pay the difference. I just want you to commit to working with me, as I'm going to commit to working for you and do all these things.
I think that's huge. I think that's the piece that buyers really don't understand until you sit down and explain that part to them. So I think that makes it a lot simpler. Anything else, guys? We're just at about our time. Well, I do want to thank you, Daniel. This has been awesome. I think this goes to show there is so much knowledge within the CBCA family. You just have to reach out and connect with people. We'll be trying to bring you guys even more trainings just like this. But again, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. This was awesome today. Love it.
I love it. I love this.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a fabulous
Thank
rest of your
you.
day. I will be sharing the recording with everybody